Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sulima Melendez, and I am the Communication Specialist for TMDSAS. I want to welcome you guys to another TMDSAS office hour session that we have for today. Our TMDSAS office hours are live Q&A sessions that we host on our TMDSAS and Texas Health Education Service Facebook pages, meant to cover topics that are frequently asked by applicants like you, and to provide you guys the opportunity to ask questions about anything in your application. And so for today's session, I'm really excited because I do have our guest, our applicant liaison, Breanna Beats, is here for this session where you can ask anything. If you ever wanted to ask your applicant liaison about coursework, PCR, residency, or anything else about the application processing, or any question that you have, this is your chance. And of course, we are human. So if there's something that we are not quite familiar with, we will let you know about that and how we can get back to you and answer those questions. And as well as Brianna will also share some insights that she has on the applicant liaison side that they would love for you guys to know about. And just a quick reminder, if you have any questions at any time, you can comment down below. And a recording will be available on our YouTube channel and via the Inside Health Education podcast to listen or watch at a later time. And so without further ado, Brianna, if you would like to introduce yourself, let us know anything about you, just so we can get to know you a little bit more.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Sulema. That was a marvelous opening. I'm so excited to be here for these office hours today. My name is Breanna Beats. I am an applicant liaison with TMDSAS, and I have been for the past 3 application cycles. And so my current role is to, assist applicants and a liaison for you to, communicate with as we process your applications. Another thing I do here at TMDSAS is resource development. So I am working on all of those resources that hopefully applicants are out there using before they submit their application, which would be things like the information on the website, the Inside Health Education newsroom, where all those articles are going that you've probably seen pop up at least once, I hope by now, and then the application handbook, aka the guide to everything.
Nice, and thank you for that introduction. So just to give you guys that background, now if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the chat. And so we'll just move along with some of the top questions that we see that our liaisons receive, we'll flip it. We'll come back to that. But Brianna, first we want to hear from you and the liaisons. What is it that applicant liaisons would love for applicants to know about right now?
Yeah, so one of the most important things and pieces of advice that we would give to any applicant is to consider your timeline. When you want to apply, what the deadlines are leading up to that for you, depending on which type of applicant you are, medical, dental, veterinary applicant, make sure you familiarize yourself with all of those timeline considerations for when things need to be in, when you need to be reaching out to your evaluators, things like that. And then also knowing the resources. Part of the job, part of applying to these programs, to medical, dental, and veterinary, are to do your own research and access those available tools that we do have for you. Sometimes they are tools, resources, sometimes they are the policies, the rules, the things you have to be on the lookout for. Make sure you're, dotting your I's, crossing your T's with everything. And all of that information does exist for you on our website within the handbook. So just making use of that, giving yourself time to research, and you'll thank yourself later for that preparation that goes into it. Along with that is knowing your coursework, looking up your course listing for your institution, having an idea of what coursework you even do have to enter, getting your transcripts together for your own benefit so that you can go in and list all those courses and get through that bulk of the application, because it is pretty time consuming. And then if there's anything else I want people to know, it's a little bit of our terminology, because I know with application processing, there are some terms that some folks maybe haven't heard before, or they might think that those terms mean something else. but within our system, they have a specific meaning. So I wanted to touch base on those. When we talk about verifying coursework, that's something that the liaisons are going in and doing. We're looking, I'll get into more detail about it later, but we're looking in and we're coding those courses and making sure everything is correct there. That's a verification process. Validation is a different process that happens much later on, and that's the part where we look at official transcripts and cross-reference that information, that coursework information. We use the terms processing. That means, your application has not yet been transmitted to the schools, that we are in the process of going through that coursework and checking everything within your application. And then transmission is a term that means your application has been transmitted to the schools that you have selected. We'll get into this later with the PCR, but deficiencies just mean the amount of course hours that may be missing in a prerequisite requirement, and we'll get into that more. Course coding just means, we're talking about selecting a subject area for that coursework, especially in consideration to the prerequisites like biology and chemistry, physics, mathematics. And prerequisite requirement then is just that necessary coursework that the schools do require. The schools that you are applying to do require you to meet those prerequisite requirements.
All right, thank you so much for that information. And you saved me an office hour. There is a time when it's mainly at the beginning of the cycle when those terms can be a little bit confusing. Or sometimes when we have reapplicants, they use that terminology because they already are familiar with it. And so then they're expecting something to get done for like validation, but that doesn't come until later. So thank you for clarifying all those different terms. And it sounds like it could be a lot, but don't worry. The applicant liaisons are here for you guys to help. You did mention something about applying, be mindful of the timeline. And so I did want to go ahead and share with everyone in the link below in the chat what it means to apply early. So there is a resource available on the Inside Health Education newsroom, and it's a video about medical applicants, but it can also be applicable to dental and veterinary applicants, just so you know how that timeline works and how to apply it to your situation to make sure that you're getting everything that you need and preparing for that deadline. So go ahead and share it there. In the meantime, was there anything else that you would like for us to know?
I think that's it.
Okay, perfect. Let me just share this really quick, and then we can jump into the types of questions that we often see our applicant liaisons receive.
Absolutely. And just thinking about it now, since we are coming towards the end of our entry year 2022 cycle, folks that are planning ahead for that next entry year in 2023, this is a perfect time to start glancing at a few resources. It's never too early to look at those timelines and start planning out your next, year or two leading up to professional school.
Yeah, that's correct. All right, let's see. And okay, and so to start us off, the kinds of questions that we get are usually revolving around the topics of coursework, PCR, and application processing, and sometimes residency. So to start us off, we'll go ahead and get started with coursework. For some of the questions that we typically see come into the instant messaging system that we have in the application portal are how do you determine if a course meets the prerequisites?
Yeah, so if we're putting ourselves, I'm in the mind of an applicant, I'm looking for how to code my coursework. I'm going to go to the internal course listings that do exist on the TMDSAS website. I'm not sure if we want to drop a link to that in case folks don't know where that is. But yeah, that is, the database you're pulling from to look at those courses at your institutions that have been previously approved to meet those prerequisite requirements. So then on our end, as liaisons, we have an internal listing, sometimes a little bit more detailed as far as, what is considered other science, yes to BCPM, those sort of things. So we go in and code that coursework according to those listings. And I know this is like the next question up, but I'm going to answer it here because it fits.
Yeah.
If there is no listing, you're going to go, I mean, not that you necessarily have to. As an applicant, you can just go ahead and use your best judgment. You know, this course is a biology lecture course taken out of the biology department. I'm going to code it as such. And if there are any adjustments made, they'll be made on our end during processing. So if there is no listing that currently exists on the TMDSAS website for your institution, what's going to happen is you can kind of go off of the bachelor's degree of science for biology. And those requirements for that biology, that BS in biology, that degree are going to basically, hit that mark. So that's what we are looking at.
Nice. Thank you so much, because that is a question that we typically get, and I'm glad that you were able to answer it. And just to provide another link for that, just since we are talking about the coursework topic, there are a couple of articles in the Instant Health Education newsroom that further talk about this. And we do have an article that specifically outlines what to do in the case that there is no course listing. So not only do you look out for that course listings page and refer to your biology degree requirements, but you can also get involved with your pre-health advisor at your school who can help you out with that as well. So I'll go ahead and insert the link in there as well.
I was going to say, this is a great article. I was looking over it earlier. Very helpful, especially for folks who are questioning whether their stats course will meet the requirement. I think we have a nice
Mhm.
note there that kind of details that.
Yes, and that is, again, questions that we typically see from our applicants that we incorporated in those resources to get you guys the questions or answers that you need to your questions. And so moving along to the next, we have quite a bit of like different types of questions. So I'll try to briefly skim through those pretty quickly just to see which ones we can address. And let's see. So a lot of times, especially at the beginning of this application cycle, we had our applicants go in and list the courses that have taken this far. Mainly, a lot of them were working on this in May, June, and so they didn't know exactly what courses they were going to take in fall and spring. And so a lot of times they were under the impression that it was okay to leave those out because they don't know what that is and they don't want to put misinformation in there in their application. But can you explain to us a little bit more as to why that might not be a good approach?
Yeah, definitely. So within the college's attendance section, whatever the dates are listed there, through whatever term you have listed as your dates of attendance for that institution, that's got to match up in the coursework area. Otherwise, you'll be getting a message from us, and it'll, just cause a little bit of a I don't want to say a delay in any way, but it just causes a back and forth of communication that has to be taken care of before the application moves forward. We finish and transmit to the schools. So make sure that you are entering any coursework for any terms that you've entered. Planned coursework, super simple. You just have to put placeholder if you don't know. And that just kind of sets that apart in the coursework so that the schools know you plan to take some courses that term, because the schools are the ones who are going over your application and they're reviewing all of that coursework, so it gives them a better idea. And some folks will just put, I'm taking a course in chemistry, placeholder, not sure yet. So that just it's just information to help the schools know what you do plan on taking. So you got to get that information in there. If you do need to change it later on, say you already applied in May and you now know what you're taking for this semester or the spring semester, just message your liaison. Oftentimes applicants are able to go in and update their own grades. Sometimes they're able to update their coursework. It just depends. Sometimes you can update your planned coursework details, but if for some reason you can't get in there, like you're locked out of the term, just reach out to us and ask us to unlock that specific term. You can go in and update your courses and then let us know when you're done with that via the instant message, and then we verify that coursework for you.
Awesome, thank you. And just for more information about what the placeholders are, because we do get questions about what exactly are placeholders. We do have information about that and how to create those on page 29 in the application handbook. Have it memorized already. And so let's see. Moving on to the next question. That is, how do you verify my courses without my transcripts? Since our new policy is that we will only be asking for transcripts once an applicant, if you're a medical or dental applicant, once you are accepted, the schools let us know. Team DSCS will reach out to you to collect your transcripts. And if you were a vet applicant, then we will reach out to you whenever the schools have let us know that you've been interviewed. But Brianna, can you go into a little bit more information about why we are okay with not having the transcripts right now?
Yeah, so this goes back to that division between the term verification and the term validation, because with verification, we're just going in to make sure that the course codings are correct and that the number of hours entered isn't, abnormally high, or it's just to make sure everything looks correct. But only later on with that validation process are we cross-referencing that official transcript. So that's actually a question I get quite a bit from folks who I've said, hey, congratulations, just transmitted your application. And they'll go to their PCR page and they will see that up in the corner, it says validated, and then it'll have an N for no. And that makes people a little uneasy, thinking that their coursework hasn't been approved or something like that. But that's not the case. All that means is that later on in that validation process, after you've interviewed with a school, and have been offered an acceptance, like you're moving towards matriculation, that's when that validation process happens. And that's just to make sure that we have that everything that you've entered is, accurate according to your institution.
All right, thanks for clarifying because we do get that question a lot as well. And it's nothing to freak out. Don't worry about it just yet, and especially not during right now in this point in the application cycle because we're not quite there yet. But once we are in the validation stages and at that point, then that would be something that you can ask. And you mentioned something about the making sure that coursework is entered incorrectly and that the hours match and they're not too high. And so just to give you some a question that we typically get as well is my school uses units, and so I was told to convert it to hours based on what I see in the handbook. I entered my coursework, and now I received a message that my hours are too high. How do I do this? How do I enter my courses?
Yeah, this is a great question. It does come up from time to time. So first and foremost, we want you to look at and you will want you to look at the official transcripts from your institution. So that's for your benefit. You have those official transcripts when you go to enter your coursework into the application, or even now, say you've submitted your application and you're getting some communications with us about it. Make sure you always have your official transcript from your university. And most of those transcripts list credit hours and grade points earned. Those are two separate categories. So the grade points earned is like GPA hours. Those are usually higher. The credit hours a little bit lower. Sometimes people mistake them. So for a 3-hour lecture course, they are instead putting in the 12 number for their GPA hours. So use the credit hours. It'll be the smaller number most of the time. I don't know if that's universally true, but it could be. If most of your lecture hours are between, say, 3 to 5 hours, then your school likely does not use a conversion. So you're on regular semester or quarter hours. There are some schools out there that grant credits as course units. So if your grades are reported as units, you do need to convert them into either semester or quarter hours. Usually the back of your transcript will have a conversion for you. So that's another reason why that official transcript is very important. If not, if there's nothing on the back that helps you out, you can contact your registrar's office for that conversion. You may also see under your school's course listing on our website, when you look at that course listing, you may see a conversion listed there for you. For example, like I know Austin College and Duke University have a conversion of like 1 unit is 4 semester hours. So if there's any special notes, just make sure to pay attention to those. Northwestern University has one. I think it's along the lines of 1 unit is 4 quarter hours. So just make sure you familiarize yourself with that. And if you're thinking to yourself right now, well, I've never heard any of those types of conversions, I'm very confused, it could be very possible your school does not use a conversion and you don't even have to worry about it.
Yes, thank you. Because I know that some people were already getting a little bit like when we mentioned it before, if we received a call, we'd get some kind of questions as to, I see this in the handbook, but I don't know, does this apply to me? But I think if you look at your transcript, I think you would be able to, and again, the official transcript is the best tool to have. So you'll be able to see if that applies to you. And so another question that we have, let me just double check to see if we have any questions in the chat. And Rich, thank you so much for answering these questions again. Thank you so
Of
much.
course, happy to do it.
All right, nothing so far. Again, just a reminder, if you do have questions, you can just drop them in the chat. Well, we'll go ahead and continue with the questions that we typically get, so that way Brianna can help us with that. Let's see. And so speaking of using your best judgment, do the best you can to enter those courses in. Is there any penalty or any kind of reason to get disqualified if an applicant submits an application and the coursework is entered incorrectly?
No, and I just want to say this once right now, there's no sort of disqualification over how you've entered your coursework in. I've heard people use the term toss out my application. Not going to happen. That is not a it doesn't just go away because you've made an error. That's not correct. We will always communicate with you if something is needed in that application. But these things aren't going anywhere. It's not like papers being tossed into the fire or anything like that. We promise.
Thank you. Yeah, we did get that term used a lot on the phones. And we promise you that's not, the schools are not out to get you. We're not out to get you. We want to make sure that you succeed and that you have a great application. And if there is something that looks a bit odd, we will communicate with you. Don't worry. We're not gonna, like Brianna said, we're not gonna toss it out. All right. And then another question that we've been getting recently was why does my GPA calculation look different and much lower right now? I just submitted my application.
Yeah, this is a great question. Comes up a lot. I have an answer that I'm scrolling for because it's very detailed. And I should say that the answers to most everything we've said so far that we've talked about can be found in the handbook. All of these policies or updates or anything like that, all listed in the handbook. What I like to do with the handbook, because it is a PDF document, I will just search the entire document for the word or phrase I'm looking for. Although we do have a great table of contents that gets you where you need to go, but I will do that search and can usually find that specific phrasing of whatever my question may be.
Yes, and we use it too when we get calls or messages. We do quick searches on specific topics, so that way we can pull from that information, since it is readily available to you, and we'll just pull that since it is already a good resource to use.
Yeah, and that being said, the website also has a search bar tool that I find so helpful. You type in what you're looking for and you get quite a few results coming up within our website. Can take you exactly to that specific page of what you're looking for. Our FAQ button on the homepage, also very helpful for that. Okay, so I did find the GPA answer. So the question is, why may this GPA be different than what my transcript says from my school?
Yeah, so right now, especially for vet applicants who are submitting their application, we've gotten a couple of questions about why, when they just submitted their application, why is their GPA lower than they expected, or what's on their school transcript. So if you can just provide some details about that.
Yeah, this one is twofold. Sometimes folks will have retaken a course for a replacement grade, but we consider all coursework. So you would be, entering that course that you retook. You'd be entering both times you took that course. So the other part of this is that grades do become standardized as they are entered into the application system. So that means that the application system will convert the grade to a flat grade. So this means no plus or minus is factored into the GPA, but those designations should be recorded. Like if you got an A+ on your official transcript, you're going to still enter an A+. However, the GPA calculation is a flat grade. So to summarize, yes, TMDSAS calculates the flat grade, and you do also need to make sure you are including the plus or minus in the grade section. But yeah, so that's why we come up with just slight differences in GPA. Sometimes people will get a little confused about graduate work, coursework, because that is a separate GPA. So there are like several GPA factors going on. There's also your science GPA. So there's many computational factors going into the system, creating those very special, unique, amazing numbers that the schools see and use. But yeah, it is a system calculation.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying. And one thing that we do say at the TMDSAS support is if you recently just submitted your application, it's not finalized in any way. So we still need the applicant liaisons to go in and look over your coursework and be able to adjust those, for example, the codes, and just adjust that and make sure everything is entered correctly, right?
Right, because if we're giving out those BCPM GPA considerations, that's something that depending on how the course is coded, your liaison may be doing, maybe designating those courses. Say for instance, you mark something as other science that's in the biology department, but does not meet the prerequisite requirement. Odds are we are going in there, seeing that it's other science, it's in biology department, and selecting that BCPM designation. And so that's always going to boost up your GPA once all those considerations are made.
Got it. Thank you. And let's see, we're going to do 2 more questions about coursework. So before we move on to the next topic, I'm a non-traditional applicant. Do y'all accept coursework from 2010?
We do. So we accept your coursework. And as far as I know, the schools, there isn't an issue with coursework 10 years old. If it's a prerequisite course is the only consideration we throw out there, is if it's a prerequisite course and it was taken a long, long time ago. I mean, if we're talking like 15 years ago and you took, your chemistry courses, that may say something to the schools. They may prefer to see more recent grades for those prerequisites. However, you would need to reach out to the individual schools you're applying to confirm that information. But long story short, yes, we take all of the coursework.
And sorry, I had one more. Actually, we'll just do 2 more questions on coursework because these are the ones that we saw that we were getting recently. And so speaking about the prerequisites, I know I need to retake, this is for those with foreign coursework, but they know that they have to retake those prerequisites in the US. Can their foreign coursework count towards meeting the 90-hour requirement?
Yeah, so only the coursework from US institutions would count towards that 90-hour requirement. So foreign coursework, though it does not, you will still list that coursework. In listing it and coding that coursework, just worry about, is it non-science or other science? Because those other course considerations wouldn't really come into play here because the prerequisites do need to be from US institution. And there are more details I just wanted to point out. The coursework section of the website, as well as the coursework section of the handbook. And of course, I didn't write down the handbook page, but could probably quickly find it.
I'll go ahead and copy the link to the prescribed coursework definitions, since that's where we have the information.
But yeah, still that is part of your coursework. You're still listing all of that foreign coursework, but just know that the 90-hour requirement is in regards to US institution coursework.
Okay. And let me just double check while I'm here if you have any questions. Nope, not yet, but this is great information so far. Let's see. All right, so moving on with PCR. So this is another hot topic that we usually see in the instant messages. Let's see. So when the applicant receives the "Congratulations, your application has been transmitted" message, they are told to look at the PCR. But what exactly are they looking at in this PCR?
Yeah, so your PCR, your prescribed coursework review document, in case you were wondering what those letters stood for. Once your application, has been processed, transmitted, you're encouraged to go look at that document, because that document breaks out your prerequisites into separate course areas. We have English, statistics, biology, biochemistry, chemistry, organic chemistry, and physics. So that's the quick breakdown. Basically, that document pulls all of your prerequisites from your entered coursework after we've coded it accordingly, goes into that document so that you can see if you have any deficiencies. It's also a document that the school is looking at and looking over as well. They also look over all of your coursework. This is what I tell people who are stressed if they have any deficiencies on that PCR document, is that the schools get to see all of your coursework. So if you have some science courses that were maybe taken pass fail or credit, regular course taken for credit, that information is still there and they can see it. However, it just does not get pulled onto that PCR document. So the main thing you're looking for is deficiencies here. And I would say pay special attention to your lecture hours and your lab hours to know where the deficiency lies, because it may be 1 hour deficiency, and seeing that is in the chemistry lab, then lets you know that that is an hour of prerequisite coursework that needs to be taken, ideally before you matriculate. However, I will say it is up to the schools how they choose to view those deficiencies. It is just our job to make sure, all that information is there for the viewing. The schools will make those decisions, and some applicants, will talk to schools during interviews about those deficiencies. That's a time that they can be discussed. The only time it could be problematic, you may want to reach out to your liaison if you have questions, is if there are a huge number of deficiencies, because there may be something larger going on there. But just make sure as you go to apply in your early stages, any of you out there that are in your early stages of application, and planning for that application, that you're looking at those prescribed coursework hours and what you do need to take, and planning ahead so that you do have those hours.
Yeah, thank you. So that did answer one of our questions. It's when the coursework is pass fail, and why it doesn't show up on the PCR. You've addressed it, and so it's not going to populate in the PCR.
However, I noticed on that question, we're talking specifically about spring 2020. So I did want to take a second. As we know, spring 2020, because due to the pandemic, there were a lot of adjustments with how courses were taken, whether they were moved from on campus to online. And so I do get quite a few questions about this. So I wanted to talk about the specifics of this. Like I said, anything that's pass fail or taken satisfactory or unsatisfactory, or a regular course that's taken for a credit grade, those aren't eligible to show up on the PCR because that's how the calculation works. However, you don't need to worry, because it's very common and it's not just happening to you. A lot of people, have this, I won't even call it an issue. It's just like a little asterisk, right? Of like, this course happens to not appear on the PCR, but it is a science course. And it's just because it was taken during that pandemic that there wasn't an option to take it for a grade. And the medical, dental, and veterinary schools do take this into special consideration. Like I said, it's an issue that affects everybody and we're all aware. So that's something that you can trust that the schools take into consideration when they're looking over all of your coursework.
Yes, thank you, because that is a point of stress whenever you know that you've taken the courses, but they're not showing up on the PCR. But again, it's because everyone is in the pandemic, everyone was affected by this. And so a lot of the only option really was pass fail for a lot of people or satisfactory grades or credit grades. But just know that as long as it is coded, and you can see this in the college coursework section, if you look on the area code and it says biology lecture, that means it does count as a prerequisite, and the schools will be able to see that for sure. So having in mind how the schools will see the PCR, if the applicant does have deficiencies, and the application has already been transmitted, so it's already on the school's end, how would they see that? How would they see the deficiencies? We discussed they're not going to toss out the application, but if there's anything else that you would like to add to that, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, it is up to the individual schools as to how they will view those. Some folks will just reach out to the schools that they're applying to and ask those kind of questions. Well, what if I am deficient in biology, but I do have this extra biochemistry course. People try to do trades with us, but it's not a playing card situation. We don't do trades.
Yeah.
So we have nothing to do with that. So don't ask us because we aren't able to help you there. Sorry. But you can talk to the school, see how they would view that deficiency. Some folks choose to take another course between now and matriculation, especially if the school wants them to alleviate that deficiency. In some cases, if you go into your coursework, and the easiest example I can think of is something in a biology department that did count towards your BS biology degree that you think should be considered to meet the bio lecture requirement, then you may submit a course appeal. And that will be, your liaison will communicate with you and send you the link and instructions for how to start a course appeal.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing up the course appeal. Can you let us know how long that takes?
Yeah, I think we are at the 10 to 15 day range for course appeals, where we have a team member who's working really hard on those. We're prioritizing those and getting through as many as we can. So just know that is, we have such a high volume of course appeals, so it is a longer process. But we do have some dedicated folks who are working their way through those every day to make sure we can get them back, those answers to those appeals back out to you as soon as possible.
Thank you, Brianna. And that helps another stress point right there with the course appeals. But just know that they are getting through those. There are a lot. So, and we are in the peak of the season, a little bit over the peak, but it's still within the application season. So things are still a little bit busy. But they are working hard on getting those ready for you guys and submitted, and let you know if it was approved or denied. And so just let me quickly look just to make sure if you have any questions. And making sure that we've covered the majority of the questions that we receive. Okay, all right, nothing so far, but we'll continue. And let's see. Okay, this one, are graduate courses on the PCR?
No, graduate courses will never be on the PCR. And I say that because I get this question a lot, except for there is one exception. If you've taken a biostatistics course, that may satisfy the statistics requirement. But no, these are prerequisites, meaning that coursework, that essential coursework that needs to be taken at the undergraduate level to satisfy those requirements by the schools. However, like I've mentioned before, the way your coursework shows up for the schools, they see everything. A lot of those science courses at the graduate level, we're going through as liaisons and we are coding those that are eligible for BCPM inclusion. So that is a special, so if you have a biology graduate course, it's going to be other science and yes to BCPM, most likely, with the exception of something like ethics, right? But if it's a majority science-based course, that's going to go towards your BCPM. So that coursework does still matter. Graduate coursework does still matter, but no, it may not go towards your PCR or any deficiencies on the PCR.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah.
It is a question that we also have been seeing on the TMDSAS support side quite a bit. And so just making sure that they are hearing it from our liaison. And it's not a bad thing if it doesn't show up on the PCR. It's just not part of those meeting the prerequisites that are needed, which is typically on the undergraduate level, like you said.
And I will say there is a small caveat there, because if you are taking a course and it's not at a graduate level, you just say you got your bachelor's degree already, but you go back to take some more courses, which is considered a PB or post-bac status. Those courses that are still taken at that undergraduate level, even though you've gotten a degree and are just going back as a non-degree seeking student, those are eligible, depending on your course codings for your institution, to satisfy the requirements. And so anything that's going towards a graduate degree then would not.
Yes, thank you. That's actually a really good point. And we've gotten some of those questions, but thank you for bringing that up because it's not the same as a graduate level. And so I believe that's mainly it for the PCR questions. Now we're going to talk a little bit about residency. And I'll go ahead and link. We did have an office hour with Nicole a couple months ago. I believe this was in July, but it was Nicole was helping us understand or highlighting things that we needed to know about residency. So I'll go ahead and link that in the chat below. It's a great video, a lot of useful information, and we had quite a bit of engagement. So we had a lot of questions that were answered during that office hour.
Yes, and Nicole is such a knowledgeable resource for all things residency related.
All right, so I went ahead and put it in the chat. I'm going to quickly go over the types of questions that we see our applicant liaisons receive in regards to residency once it's a current applicant and they've submitted their application. And so whenever the applicant, works on their application, it's submitted, the system will initially, for some cases, say they are a non-Texas resident. Right now, does that mean that they need to submit documents? What do they need to do if they are told by our application once they enter their information that they're declared as a non-Texas resident?
Excellent question, very common question. The most important thing to know here is that the system is going to yield an initial determination based on those residency section answers, the answers to the questions in that section that you have filled out. But know that this is not the final determination because once your application goes through processing with a liaison, that liaison is reviewing that information. So there are, humans looking over that information and going through other parts of the application, such as your activities and things like that, the timeline of activities, contact information, that sort of thing. And based on all of that, reviewing all of that, your liaison may reach out for some residency documents that are needed to verify that residency status. And those would be able to be uploaded at that time. So you can upload those at the time that your liaison is asking for that information. Your liaison will be sending you like a request link that shows up. I believe it shows up by email and in the IMs. And then you just click the link and that's the spot where you can upload your documents. We'll be very specific about what we need and how to upload them. And then as soon as that information comes back to us from you, we complete our residency review and make that determination.
Nice. And so speaking of documents and uploading those using that link, a lot of times the applicants are told to submit a voter registration card or a driver's license, and perhaps they don't have that because of COVID or whatever the reason may be. But if they don't have that document, what else should they upload or what should they do?
Yeah, so that's a really common one with the voter registration card. The best way to get that information is you can go over to the Texas Secretary of State website. It's the title of the page, Am I Registered? I actually do have the specific site here, if I can just drop that
Perfect.
for you, and then
Yeah.
maybe you can pass that on.
Yeah, absolutely.
But from that site, you'll be able to do a quick search for yourself, make sure you're registered, and then you can take a screenshot of that information and just upload the screenshot instead.
Oh, nice. Perfect. Yeah, that's definitely a common question that we receive as well. So here's how to. And that way they can obtain this themselves and be able to upload that into the document. But thank you.
Yeah, and if you ever have questions, applicants, if you ever have questions along the way about the kind of documents we're asking for, feel free to just send us an IM and we'll get back to you as soon as we can to help clarify that.
Yes, and I did want to mention a lot of times we have applicants who call and ask us those questions. And unfortunately, since we're not specialists in residency or anything like that, we just know the basic information that is needed for the application. Unfortunately, we're only able to just provide the insights of those documents. Like, oh, this is the utility bill. Okay, so that could be like a cable if people still have that or anything like that. But if you had specific questions like for specific documents, replying back to the applicant liaison will be your best bet because they do have more knowledge about that and what exactly they're looking for and can provide some guidance on that if you have anything that's missing. Let's see. Okay. All right, and so let's say that the application was submitted, a non-resident, and then they supported documents, and it seemed like it was still the final determination was Texas resident. Is there any way that they can appeal that? And what do they need to submit to prove that they're Texas residents?
So if the determination has been made by the liaison, they've been determined to be a non-Texas resident, as according to the rules by the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, which is the rules that we are going off of here and upholding at the request of the schools that you're applying to. And so if you get that non-Texas resident determination, there is an option for appeal. So the letter that you would have been emailed that outlines, the rules for residency and why or how you as an applicant were not determined to meet those rules. That information is laid out in a formal letter, and that letter has appeal instructions at the bottom.
All right, thank you. Yeah, that is something that we see. But don't worry, you can appeal that kind of like what you can do with the coursework. If you think that a course should be included, that's the course appeal. If you believe that you should be considered a Texas resident, that would be a way to appeal that. And I think that's mainly it. Other questions that we typically get or specifics about property and owning property, perhaps with a parent. And so if you want to give some information about that, Brianna, because that's typically what we see. We do have that in our office hour, but maybe just a quick reminder of.
Yeah, the best thing someone can do, whether they're at the point of submitting their application, but ideally, a year before they're submitting, looking at those residency rules and knowing, not just assuming that you would meet Texas residency. For instance, there's a scenario here, a little reminder I wanted to give out as far as like students who go to college in Texas. And especially like in this specific scenario where you're a student going to college in Texas currently and did not graduate high school in Texas. And at that point, then the burden of proof is on that applicant to show how they have established and maintained their domicile in Texas. And that could be in a myriad of different ways. Sometimes that's if you're a dependent of your parents for tax purposes and your parent is a Texas resident. That is a pathway. Another pathway would be if you are independent, but you are working 20+ hours a week. in Texas. But as a student, it's not enough just to provide documentation of living here. There is the burden of proof to show that domicile has been established and maintained for that 12-year or 12-month period. Not 12 years, I promise, just 12 months.
Yeah, just 12 months. All right. Yeah, thank you so much. That is a scenario that we get asked a lot. But again, that residency video from the office hour that we have with Nicole does talk a little bit more about that. If you want to know more specifics about it, I encourage you all to watch that. And if you still have any questions about it, you are more than welcome to send a message in the internal messaging system in the application portal, or feel free to ask residency questions to the info@tmdsas.com. And those questions do get forwarded to residency specialists who can help you guys out with that. And any kind of like clarification, especially for planning on a future applying, like applying in the future and just knowing what you can do at this time for planning purposes, that can be they won't be able to tell you this is you are going to be a Texas resident, but they will kind of give you some guidelines and an idea of what your outcome would most likely be.
I'm so glad you just caught that, because that is one thing you should not do is email us and say, here's my specific scenario. Am I a resident or not? We will not be able to give you that determination. We don't do any sort of determinations over the phone or in an email, like I had just said, if that were the example, because it is so much more detailed than that, that we have to be looking at your application and the details of that application in order to make that determination or see what kind of documents would be necessary. However, we can give you a clarification about the options for establishing residency. I would say before asking any questions, make sure that you've done your research by going to tmdsas.com, and you can find these in the before you apply section. The Texas residency overview, super helpful. I was gonna look to see, make sure I had it correct from if you were on the home page, how to get there the quickest. I guess if you go about the application and you were to go down to dental, medical, or veterinary, you're gonna pick one, and you can find guidelines for applying. And then actually, okay, above that is residency. Okay, so about the application up top, you click on that. Third one down is residency. That's all you'll need.
Yes, and so again, we can't give you an official determination, but we can help you figure out kind of what your options are at this time, especially if you're planning for ahead. And yeah, and right now we do currently have on our homepage the photo carousel. So it would be the second one right after the announcement about the bed application deadline being extended. The second photo from that is the Texas residency information.
I
Just
just
click on
saw
that. Yeah, so there, I mean, it's on there multiple times. So there's multiple routes of getting there to find that information. But I think that's mainly it that we have for now on our top questions that we get from these specific topics. So I'm just going to go back and just double check one last time if we have any questions in the chat, both in TMDSAS and the Texas Health Education Service page. But any last things that you would like to add, or anything that came to mind that you would like to address really quick?
Yeah, I'm just looking over my notes here, see if I have anything. I know that a question on here regarding making changes to the application. Just wanted to throw out there that if you go to the application handbook, Appendix C, which is page XV, that has the list of approved changes that can and cannot be made after submission. So I know that is a pretty important, can be a pretty important resource for folks right now who have submitted and maybe have had something come up and they're wondering if they can or cannot change some of their information.
Got it. Yeah, and then for those changes that can't be made, because there are specifics and it lists it out in that appendix and in the application handbook and on the website. But there are specific sections like those in the biography section that cannot be changed post submission. And so if at any point there is an update, significant update that you need the schools to know about regarding one of your activities that you previously entered, you can feel free to create a one-page addendum and take that with you to the interviews. That's not something that we provide or a template, but you can easily find that on online, or just it can be anything like just a list of the things that have changed and Just make sure that you have that when the interviews come around, so that way you can provide that information to the schools. But that would be the best way, I guess. And this is the recommendation that I've been giving based on
Yeah.
what I was told by liaisons, to have updates for that.
That is the perfect explanation. That's what I tell applicants as well. More important things like, not to say one is more important than the other, but more vital things like a name change would go through us, and we are able to help make that change if we have that official documentation from the applicant. We're happy to assist and get things like that taken care of for you. But updates to activities, like there's so many activities everyone's doing, and you're putting in planned activities. And as we discussed with planned coursework, sometimes things change from semester to semester. And so that's very normal, very typical. So any of those adjustments, just keep track, keep a notebook going with any new activities, research projects, adjustments to the hours or types of research projects and activities you'd put in the application, and then just type it up formally and bring it with you to your interviews.
All right, perfect. Great suggestions and advice for that. And so I think we've reached the end of the session. We didn't have any questions in the chat, which is not a bad thing. This is available for everyone to take a look at, watch, or listen to at another time. Again, on our YouTube channel and the Inside Health Education Newsroom podcast. It will be available on there to watch at a later time. A lot of useful information, so I highly recommend to watch the entirety of it. Breanna, thank you so much for being here with us again. I
Of
appreciate
course. Thank you for
especially during
having
lunch.
me.
Yeah, of course. All right, guys. And so we look forward to seeing you guys next time, next week. It'll be 30-minute session just here available for you guys to ask any questions that you may have. And provide any kind of updates that we see that you guys should know about in the newsroom, or any things to look out for. But again, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.